And hello, everyone. Here we are on the final day of our challenge, and it is Good Friday. So I hope you're having a great Friday. And this is going to be our final chance to be able to take some Q&As on our challenge, as well as for everyone to share whatever has been the biggest learning from this week for everyone who's been part of this. So I am actually posting right here, and it's about to start. And I'm just going to say, hi, everyone. Please do post what has been your biggest learning this week, right? And as I basically get the questions that come through, I've got a whole bunch of questions that are here as well, and I want to be able to just give a quick overview for everyone who is on this. I know many people watch this after we actually do the live, as I have done every week. So we are actually running our entire 5-day program that we're running, where we're actually giving away $50,000, and that's going to be happening next week. That we are doing this all on this Facebook group, as well as here on YouTube with the Q&As. And every day we've been posting as we've been going. We had today the kind of like 5th day, as you can see here, where we actually were sharing all of the different elements in here. Loads of really, really great comments here. We've got here, Cicely, we've got Brent here saying, just wow, one of the best hours I've ever spent. Well, make that about 7 in total. I've watched the full challenge on replay, so I haven't been able to comment in real time. So such a high level of info in so many important ways. And so some really good stuff on here. Lots of people giving great comments on things here. Really love market behaves as a rational Mr. Drunk. Got here. This is really interesting here. Tom from Palau, I grow giant clams and corals and interested in using NFTs to fund my giant clam restocking program. Similar to what Roger mentioned about trees and Andy Steele. What would be my next step? Okay, cool, right? Well, I'll answer that question in a moment, actually. And then so it continues, right? Like, what if somebody will be only, okay, that's this question on basically talking about the virtual reality and how that all links together. And everyone posting what's the biggest learning as they go through this as well. So do come and have a look, get connected to the group here. It's an amazing group. It's been fantastic to have everyone on board. As a quick recap, what we actually covered over 5 days is just how much we need to be thinking differently about our entire portfolio going forward. And so while we've actually made it a really fun little challenge that we're actually running, where everyone's actually putting the portfolio templates together, we actually went through everything from what it is to be Investor 5.0, global stocks and shares, cryptocurrencies and commodities, property investment, the entire portfolio plan. We had Mark Robinson on from Australia, who runs the International Academy of Wealth. We had Marcus DeMaria on, who runs Investment Mastery, Your Crypto Club in Germany and England. We have Simon Zucchi on, who is one of the companies of Property Investors Network, which is becoming part of the Genius Group. And so taking what he's doing global at the moment. And then I had myself every day coming on board, which was like super fun. And we went starting with the top investment trends and just how much the top billionaires are really like saying the opposite of each other, but all agreeing on one thing, which is everything's a hedge against the US dollar right now. We went through basically what it is to have 5 steps to 5 years, mapping out a plan, starting with 5.0, which is the idea that we're moving into a totally different economy now. And it's actually happening as a result, not just of the pandemic, which has accelerated it, as a result of us moving from Society 4.0, information society, into the imagination society, where effectively, instead of us actually accessing the internet via a mobile phone, we're going to be accessing it via a digital layer, right? Which basically just totally enhances our real world experience. People aren't going to be talking about screen time anymore because people won't have screens, right? So we're actually seeing a very, very different world that we're about to move into, like pretty much like a whole new renaissance. And we're seeing this at speed now with the things that's going on, right? So these strategies we went through here: hedge and hold, double down on disruption, digitize your assets, and also prepare for impact. All of these different things here, speed beats size, or then integrated into all the things that we're actually seeing there in the marketplace. And I want to go a bit deeper on this call, our final Q&A, on some of these areas and what they actually mean for you and your business as well. And then we actually went in there to actually explain what are the age of exponentials. Like I showed some videos today of how Kathy Wood was talking about this 2 years like 20 times, and that's happened as a result of like the growth that's actually happened here. What's happened here? Okay, and then also at the same time, how everyone who is just thinking about a particular asset has got to switch their thinking to portfolio plan, or else they're just going to be stressed out by how much the markets are going up and down. But it's not the old-fashioned portfolio plan where you're looking at asset division. It's actually about portfolio 5.0, where the allocation is not as a result of assets, is as a result of performance levels. And then actually explaining what are the 8 criteria at every one of those performance levels, what they look like. We went through this with Mark. what's the simplest portfolio plan you can put together. And then if you actually then break that down and actually look at how cryptocurrency fits into this, we had Marcus actually go through exactly how you set up your crypto account, what are the steps and which are the best accounts to go for, which are the best platforms, how you set up your wallet separately, and then how you track everything as you go, together with the top 5 crypto strategies today, right? And these are evolving very fast right now. So we actually went through what those were, and then that then led to Simon, where he was going through very much the different ways that you can actually now invest in property, which again is about knowing this is about you doing things in a very natural way that works for you. Like house prices are not growing as fast as cryptocurrencies are growing, but at the same time, they definitely are not going to be dropping as fast when there is a shift in the market as well. And the difference of basically retail value versus wholesale value, do not think of yourself as a retail investor. Think of yourself as a whole investor, where you're not trying to buy at retail price. You're actually buying below market price by actually connecting up with the right people that can actually group up your investments and actually get you onto the inside. And there's always a way to do that. There used to be the domain of just the hedge funds or the investment banks before, but now we all have access to that as a result of the democratization of the entire finance system. And what that all looks like in terms of the levers, the 4 levers that actually deliver all investments, and the 8 investor profiles and the 8 investor strategies, right? So I'm going through this super fast because I'm hoping some of you who actually missed the entire week will get interested enough in what we're doing here that you actually go ahead, join the group here, which is this link here. And it's all free, right? So you can just come back, the recordings are here, and you can follow through and just see what you missed here without basically missing anything. Yeah, within 6 months, this is all going to be out of date, right? But at this point, it's super cutting edge in terms of like what's really happening at the moment. And so do basically like, make sure that you're tracking as you go. We gave examples of different, like this is a great example, right? Like hotels being turned into residential. This all happened during the pandemic. Like all of these were pandemic deals that happened, which were giving different people, returns, which were in the 30 to 50% range, and explaining exactly what they did, how they did it. So Simon was great at actually explaining all of that, which is fantastic, and how he's got his own flowchart accelerator off the back of it. And then today's session is where I actually went right through the top 3 impact investor principles. So as a recap, the first of these, like I actually showed a video from Chamath Palihapitiya, where I basically showed him saying it's only if you've got the money or the purse strings, you can actually go out and make the difference in the world you want to. Otherwise, you're going to have to go basically knocking on someone else's door who's got the resources. But if you know how to create those resources, just like he does, just like Elon Musk does, just like Kathy Wood does, just like Masayoshi-san does, once you get that, then you realize it's not about, as Disney says, it's not about, making the movies to make money. It's about making the money to make movies, right? Like this is not about basically going out there to have a mission in order to make the money. It's about having the money to actually deliver on the mission. And we actually went through exactly what that looks like and how big a disruption is coming up ahead of us right now. It's really, I'm so excited about the future we're going into. And I hope you're as excited as I am. The invest in yourself was actually getting really clear. Best way to predict your future is to create it. And I actually highlighted this video, which is on the YouTube channel that you can watch, which is about basically how Elon Musk's predictions tend to come true because he's the one making them happen, right? And so when you actually start understanding how capital is actually created and how there's 3 types of capital: financial capital, intellectual capital, and social capital, that allows you to then really understand that it isn't just how capital is growing, it's how the capital markets is growing as well. So love Mr. Market. I'm going to change this actually. This is going to be Mrs. Market, talking about basically what Benjamin Graham talked about, that Mr. Market, as he says here, is kind of a psychotic drunk who basically makes irrational decisions. And we've actually turned from Mr. Market to Mrs. Market. And Mrs. Market is basically a totally different kettle of fish, right? This is where we actually can see that there is an abundance taking place right now, that it's about us collaborating with each other as opposed to competing with each other. And don't go try beat the market. Just beat your own best average, right? Like this is not about you trying to compete against the market. You don't need to, because the market in all the areas that are the emerging economy areas is growing rapidly, right? And so the difference of Mr. Market versus Mrs. Market, it's not an economy, it's an ecology. It's not the theory of scarce resources, it's the theory of abundant resources. Like we're moving to a very different world here, which is not about competing, it's about collaborating. And all of the money, the people making the most money right now are actually collaborating the most. Right? Like there's YouTubers sharing about how they're making money on cryptocurrencies or on meme stocks. There are, Reddit groups like Wall Street Bets, which are basically people collaborating and then working together. And as a result of that, they're the ones making a whole bunch more money than those just sitting alone trying to figure it out for themselves. Right? So like we're in this whole new multiplier world game taking place, purpose-driven instead of profit-driven. which goes right back to what Buckminster Fuller talked about, which is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. So this whole aspect here, right? Don't compete against the market, compete against yourself, is where we basically like completed on the session, and I gave everyone the template, which I highly recommend that even if you missed most of the program, go download the template and use it. Like join us next Thursday when we actually show the winning templates. And I gave at every one of these levels of these 5 steps here, the actual questions to go through yourself, an example of my actual future vision, right? Like what it is to have a personal compass about what is your passions, your purpose, and your talents, and what mine are as well. And like we give you the links to the free test to go take the purpose test, take the genius test, take the passions test, take the values test. And then from there, we then basically go into the exponential waves. I share with you my exponential waves that I'm surfing at the moment. And then what I've got as my investment criteria and how you set your investment criteria off these 8 different criteria steps. And then on the portfolio plan, how you can actually then go design this. And if you missed the morning session we just did, do know that we actually have given you a link, which actually takes you to the actual template, right? So if I click on this here, you'll see that you can come to the template here. It shows the different areas for you to actually build, anything that you actually change here, the percentages, the numbers, straight away by you doing this, it basically changes, everything all the way through, right? So you can actually see what does my numbers look like each year, depending on how much I'm putting in each of these areas. And I've even given you a link to my example of what I'm doing with my portfolio and what I'm looking at in terms of my plan and how I'm planning to hit the $1 billion mark in terms of making a difference out there where 90% of all of the cash coming off this is actually going to all scholarships for education and signing the giving pledge to basically know that like the vast majority of all of this is all just going to charity basically, because you can't take it with you when you die basically. So hopefully the inspiration of you putting this together and knowing that this is not a like 1 year or even 3 or 5 year journey. Like this is something which actually now sets you up for life, right? Which is what I'm like super excited by to see that happen. So I'm going to just take some questions which already are popping up here. Okay, hi everyone. We've got Jay from North Florida here. We've got Jules here saying felt so inspired this week. We've got Connor here says, hi Roger, the portfolio pyramid model has been my biggest learning and I'm going to redesign my investment portfolio as a result of what I've learned this week. Many thanks to you and all the speakers. So that's fabulous. We've got Marigot here saying there are more than one biggest learning. My 3 biggest learnings are portfolio pyramid, set targets in terms of both cash ROI and capital ROI, and starting with social capital, which is awesome. Stephen Partridge, for me, planning for international diversification of portfolio via multiple categories versus diversifying in one category with multiple files. Plan stretches comfort to more diverse and future-proof portfolio. And then Lord saying my biggest learning is the awareness, thanks to you, Roger, and Genius U team. Not a lot of people know about Investing 5.0. That's very, very true, actually. In fact, a lot of the YouTube videos you see are about people talking about one particular asset as opposed to how you actually design a portfolio and then actually make decisions based on that portfolio, which obviously is very much 4.0 as far as assets go. But once you think in performance this way, it can totally shift the way you start thinking about the things that actually enable you to be able to have the mechanisms to be able to access the money that's out there. I'll give you one example of that. We're doing this right now with our resort group. So within Genius Group, we have multiple companies. One of those companies is Entrepreneur Resorts. That's a public listed company in the Seychelles. And obviously, like the entire hospitality industry has gone through some major challenges, right? So we kind of came into this year saying, all right, so what do we want to do to really make the most of what's happened and know that it's the sale of the century, right? There are companies, hospitality companies, hotels, resorts that have already gone bust. There are companies that have actually gone out there, and in fact, I'm gonna open this up. So I'm gonna give you an example of this, of what we've done recently. Let me just see if I can open it and I can find it here. Let me see. I think I have it. Let's see if this is the one. And what we actually did was we actually walked through the fact that if you are basically in the hospitality industry, and you're really thinking about, okay, so what is what is the way I help, what is the way I manage my restaurants or my resorts? Well, that's something, if you're looking internally, you might actually spend all your time basically just thinking about your own particular business. But if you think about the industry, you think about the fact that there's all of these different companies out there that actually are getting challenged at the moment, and say, okay, well, now's the time to go out there and actually acquire a number of sites which might already have gone up to auction. They might be actually, a restaurant or a resort that right now is challenged, that actually is looking for someone that can come in with funding to support them and actually move them past the pandemic. This is the ideal time. In fact, there's never been a better time to go out and do that. So we said, okay, so we're going to do that. And we said, okay, what we're going to do is going to raise $50 million for a fund, which is going to then go out and acquire resort chains or restaurant chains, and then actually convert them into what we do, which is our co-working spaces with our learning centers. So whether or not it's Genius School or Genius Institute, or just showing up and actually connecting with others, that can all happen within our Genius Cafes, our Genius Centrals. So we said, all right, that's what we're going to do. And then we said, okay, well, let's just set it up in such a way that we have, first of all, the supply side, which is basically like knowing where the actual money is coming from, and the demand side, which is that we actually know where we're actually going to have them from. Do we know exactly where in the world this is going to be? Not necessarily. We know where our community is, but exactly who are the right people in the right place for us to actually bring them on board. That's the key thing that we want to have. So who's going to be those people on the ground that are going to go out and do this, and who and where are we actually going to generate the income? So when you start from that place, right, if we actually just go back to the pyramid, and this is a real life case which is happening right now with us. If we actually go and look at the pyramid here, let me just open it up. Let me see, where did it go? Here it is, okay. And if I just come over and share my screen, first of all, you'll see that on the pyramid, which is here, what we're really talking about here is wholesale assets, right? Remember, wholesale assets is where, as it says here, is below fair market value assets, off market bargain assets. We're not going in just seeing what's for sale. We're going into particular areas and saying, right, where do we think that there's something that's closed down, right? And you need someone on the ground to actually make that happen. So the first thing is we say, okay, well, how are we going to find that group on the ground? Well, we have a community of 1.7 million entrepreneurs around the world. So we actually ran a program in the 25th of March. And we actually invited all of our partners to come onto it. Top 3 strategies for Roaring 20s. We explained basically the key things that were going on within our organization at the moment, how we were growing, what the key things that we were doing, what our market was. Many, of course, of you know this already in terms of curriculum and so on. And then we actually explained our partnership model, and we actually went through the partnership model. And one part of it, which is the one I'm going to kind of zoom down to, is that basically, as well as us having our city partners, right, where we have city hosts running events around the world, and we have a whole bunch of new ones that are coming on board. And we have our city leaders that are actually operating in different parts of the world. We had this as well, which is basically, for the very first time, our licenses for our cafes and for our resorts. And we have 3 different levels, right? We have one, which is our central cafe model. This is a picture of our Bali Genius Cafe, where we actually have all these entrepreneur events, and everyone who goes out there is digital nomads or for co-working. We're right on the beach. And so basically, like, this is our beach club, which unfortunately I haven't been at for a year because of the pandemic, but it's open and like people in Bali are using it. And we've got a 3-year plan, which generates $1 million a year, and then basically gives you a strong profit. The Genius Central model is in Singapore. So this is a Singapore one. It's much bigger. It can generate $4 million and generate over $1 million in profit. And then the third one is Genius Resort model, which we're running. This is our Safari Lodge in South Africa. This one's doing more like $5 million with $2 million profit. And the whole point here is that we're now launching these in different parts of the world, where we actually are showing where we actually are going to be opening them up. We kind of explain how we're opening them up as licenses. We already have attracted a whole group of people saying, look, this is how Pizza Hut, Starbucks, McDonald's, this is how they run their franchises. Here's how we operate, which basically is at a lower price point to get started with a high net sales and a higher gross profit and an average profit. And the reason for this is because of the way that we actually run our events and actually at the same time run our education on top of basically having all the great food and all the great service that comes from this as well. And basically, what is the setup cost? What is the operating fees? Like really competitive. And so off the back of this, we have all of these different partners coming on board who then provide the supply side, right? Because they're the ones that then actually say, right, now that I'm in Brisbane or now that I'm in London, I'm going to go out and actually find the spot. And then we actually show them what to look for. And at the same time, we're then raising the funding. And you say, well, how are we raising the funding? Well, once you know how much you want to raise, there's a number of different ways, right? So we have three different options right now. Option number one is that basically as a public listed company, we do a new offering of shares, right? And then people buy into the equity of the actual company. Second option is that we launch a SPAC. A SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company. And you've probably been seeing lots of news about SPACs. And that's where you actually have a fund set up separately, which can still be funded by Entrepreneur Resorts, but actually is raising money separately. And then you're actually putting all of the new acquisitions within that SPAC, and that raises the money that way. And then it's effectively a listed vehicle separately alongside Entrepreneur Resorts. And then the third way is that we're actually going out and getting private investors or some combination of the three. And so because we know it's going to happen, it's just a matter of which way is the best way for it to happen. Then this is about, like I've said before, a good investor or a good entrepreneur is playing a game where the game is a cross between a jigsaw puzzle and a treasure hunt, right? Like the whole idea behind it is that you're saying, well, I've got to know what the picture on the lid looks like in order for me to know what the jigsaw looks like, but don't expect all the jigsaw pieces to be in the box. They're not going to be there, right? Some are going to be in the box. What do you already have in terms of talents? What do you already have in terms of connections? What do you already have in terms of knowledge, right? These are things that are the jigsaw pieces you've collected over time, but there's going to be other jigsaw pieces you don't have. Like, okay, so exactly how do you put a SPAC together, for example, or exactly who is going to be your advisor, or exactly like, who's going to be the private investor. And those are the jigsaw puzzles you go out on the treasure hunt and you collect them. And whichever one actually fits best, that's the strategy you go for. So it's not about whether or not we know the strategy today. It's like, no, we know the parameters of the strategy, and we have the time frame by which we decide on the strategy. So we have 2 months right now where we say within 2 months' time, we'll know the strategy. And now that we actually have those 2 months, we're now doing exactly what Jeff Bezos says, which is the best way to create creativity is to constrain your resources, right? So this is the theory of constraints. It's like if we constrain time and say time has to be just 2 months, well, then we start working on it straight away in a way we wouldn't if we didn't set a deadline, right? And then we know at the end of the time, we're going to actually have that decision made. And so we better kind of get working now on collecting all the jigsaw pieces and bringing them back, right? This is exactly the same way that you actually cook a meal, right? You start with a recipe, but at the same time as a recipe and having the picture of what it's meant to look like, you go out and get the ingredients, right? And sometimes ingredients are in the fridge, but most of them probably aren't. So this is the time to go shopping. Right. And so you as an investor, whatever you've set as your plan, some of that you've got, some of it you don't have. That's fine. Go out and get it. And this is what I'm so excited by. When you think about it that way, then you never get stuck thinking, well, I don't have the answers, because you're not trying to find the answers anyway. Okay, so I'm going to take a few more questions here. We've got Wuntan here, or actually mostly the comments at the moment. Wuntan says, I got so inspired. I just minted my first NFT on OpenSea. Congratulations, Wuntan. That's super awesome. Drop the link down if you've got it at the moment. If you're, it depends if you're actually like offering the NFT, but that's super cool that you've done that. Stephen says, great point, Roger, bought in a company during the pandemic. By the way, we had a question yesterday, which was a question about whether or not the idea of purchase lease options, whether you can, because we were talking about that for properties, whether you can do that for companies. The answer is absolutely you can do it for companies. In fact, the acquisitions that we're making, I don't think we've ever made an acquisition where we just paid the money and then acquired. Pretty much every single time, we basically, we did a sales and purchase agreement, just like you do for a house. We gave a time frame at which we're going to buy it at a certain time afterwards, usually about a year afterwards, sometimes 2 years afterwards, and then work with that company over that period towards whatever that funding event was going to be, right? So we actually had that acquisition of, I mentioned the resort. We had the acquisition of the resort, which was a purchase lease. We actually were already operating that resort, even though we hadn't bought it yet. And then at the same time, we actually had that moment when we actually then acquired it, which was after the IPO. We have education companies at the moment that we also have acquired on the basis that the closing date of it is at an IPO, right? So as a result of that, you always basically are able to time your commitments of when you're making a promise and when you're actually making an agreement to the time when you're actually going to make the payment. And if you're not thinking in that way, you're always going to say, well, I can't afford it, right? As opposed to say, well, if I actually was to package that up, how much are we then worth? And then can I actually raise the money based on that new worth? And with that money, I can then buy whatever it is that you want to buy, right? So we got here, Jung says, further learning, implementing in the next few months. thinking of writing a series about this entire investment philosophy. I love that idea. That would be so cool to do that. And popular online outlets, blogging platforms, posting it, do it. I mean, everything that I'm sharing at the moment is like for you to share out with others as well. The more people that start thinking about this, the better. I really do believe that we're going through a very major fundamental change in the way that the next generation, in fact, even our generation, thinks about our part here on the planet, right? We're not here to sit in a 9-to-5 as a robot. The robots can do that job for us. We're here to actually self-express ourselves in the way that we are humans. And if that means that we're investing in the companies we want to invest in, if that means that we're actually going out there, putting a piece of art out, which we can sell for $1 million, right? Like we should all be able to do that. And we are now in enough of a democratic financial system, which allows us all to actually be able to go out there and not just access the currencies we want, but actually create our own currencies as well, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so a couple more here. We've got some people asking for partnerships and stuff, which is great. We've got another question here. Akana says, "Hi Roger, please can you explain the difference between high growth and momentum on the portfolio pyramid? Thanks." Okay, I've got another question here from Shaq, who says, "How do you shift from scarcity to abundance even when you have cash and investments and assets when it comes to making money?" Well, I mean, again, hopefully, you got that already from what I was sharing earlier in the examples. I mean, even the example I just gave about basically going out there and choosing to acquire $50 million of property, we don't have to start with the $50 million. We have to start with saying, is it possible that with $50 million, we could actually find 250 million or more in property? And the answer is, of course you could, right? So then if I could go find that and then actually get the investors that actually can see the value in that, well, then would they invest in it? The answer is, of course they would, right? So this is all about, and I'm not saying you start with a $250 million deal. Start with a $2,500 deal, right? Like just start with something where you're actually saying, well, where's the real value here for somebody in such a way that I can actually get them interested. Simon Zucci says this. He says, look, if you want to get into property and you don't actually have the money yet, go find a really good deal that someone who did have the money would love to be a part of, and then go get connected to some of the property communities and say, hey, I've got this really good deal. Would you like to be a part of it? And for every one person who's got the time and the energy to go find the deal, there's someone else who's got the money but doesn't have that time and energy. So connect it together, right? Like this is all about connections. All great entrepreneurship and investment is not about the thing. It's about the connection between the things. And so really be thinking in that way. But to that question, which is like, okay, what is the difference of momentum compared to high growth? So high growth is when you're investing in areas like early stage investing, pre-IPOs, pre-ICOs, cryptocurrencies, which are actually growing very fast, where there is high risk because it could go down as well as up. But basically, if you're in the know, if you know what you're doing, then you're going to be making the right decisions as you go. Putting some percentage into that allows you to grow. We're seeing a lot of people that have 10 times their money on Ethereum, for example, or on Bitcoin, and that's because they got in early, right? Something like impact investor sector, all the things that Kathy Wood talks about. I've obviously focused at EdTech. I'll give you an example of this, right? Like I said this just during the week, that Coursera, who some people would say is one of our competitions, right? Because we're in EdTech, they're in EdTech as well. But I don't see them as a competition. I see them as part of the new breed of educators, where the real competition is all of the traditional education that's out there, which is a much, much bigger $10 trillion market, right? And so basically when Coursera was listing, I said, right, the moment they list, I'm going to buy some Coursera, which I did. And they were actually priced at $33 for their IPO. And then basically, I think I shared yesterday that they popped from 33, they went up like, 26%. They went from 33 and they opened at 39. So I bought at $39, right? So I'd like, think about that, right? Like everyone else had it at 33. I jump in at 39. It's like, well, like who's a crazy person to actually pay so much more? But if you actually look at Coursera, and I haven't even looked at what it's doing today, actually, it might have dropped down because it was like growing so much. But let's have a look. No, it's still going up. It's at $45 now, right? So this is where it's at the moment. Okay, we haven't opened, market's not open in New York at the moment, right? So it's still sitting here from what I can see. But you can see here, it basically went, and if you say, okay, 5 days, what's it's done? It's like, it's gone all the way up. It's actually jumped all the way to $53. And now it's kind of settling down. And it's like at the moment at $45, $46, which means buying it right here when it opened, right, at 39, right? That's still basically like already like a $6 jump, which is like a 15% jump from where it was. But I'm not in this for the short term, right? I'm going to keep on holding it because I really believe in the entire industry. And this is really what we're talking about in terms of momentum. because you're actually following the momentum up of whatever it is that you really care about. And in my case, it happens to be edtech, right? And as you saw, like with a space ETF, which Kathy Woods has just launched, that this is about really knowing that you're actually moving up with the growth of the entire 5.0 sector. This is what Master Son invests in as well, right? Then there's a little bit in cash flow, a little bit in wholesale assets, a little bit in foundation assets as well. Momentum is very different. Momentum is when you're investing with the shifts in the market, right? So momentum trading is where you're actually this is very much what you are seeing when these strategies here, right? So like a strategy where you're actually saying, okay, if it goes up by a certain amount, well, then I'll wait for it to drop, and then once it's dropping, I'll invest back up, right? Or like contrarian momentum, right? Which is basically like, okay, when I see that basically like it gets oversold, I'm going to be buying in, right? When I see it gets overbought, I'm going to be selling, right? So this is much, much more time intensive. As you already heard from Marcus, he doesn't really do any active trading himself, but you'll see on here, if you're going to go for momentum, right, and that becomes your plan, then you're going to see active trading is actually quite a big part of that. Impact asset sector is more, but you're much more active in this. And even in terms of early stage, you might have actually bought in at a pre-IPO and you would have sold within like a week or two and then gone looking for the next thing that you're looking for. So it can give you high returns, but it also is much more volatile as you go, but it's much more time intensive. You can do high growth for like 20 minutes a week because you're actually investing in and just checking how are things going and reallocating if you need to. Whereas momentum, you're really looking at like at least an hour or two every day, if not longer, because you actually are constantly every single day making decisions, right, to shift. Cash hedge is much more now talking about just putting money into things long-term, like, things more stable, like foundation assets, where you're not really like wholesale cash flow, where you're getting the cash flow out of it, where you're basically not worried about the fact the US dollar might drop by 50%. It doesn't matter. You're still going to be okay because you've got cash flow coming out and you've actually got assets which are actually growing against the US dollar, right? These are only 3 options. There is others, but these give you a very, very good, this is the most cautious, this is the most active, this is the one which actually enables you to really leverage the most on the future growth, but it's more medium to long term, where you're going to be keeping your money generally for at least like a year to 5 years in anything that you're investing in as well, right? So do think about it in that way. Okay, we're going to take a few more questions here. I got a question here, which was actually the clam question, which I found kind of like really interesting, right? Because like, how cool that someone's actually out there just like breeding giant clams. I think that's awesome. So let's just go back to that question there. And the question was very much about, well, how do I turn that into an NFT? Like, what's the way that I can do that? So let me, first of all, share with you that NFT is just one vehicle, which happens to be non-fungible tokens. They're a vehicle which allow you to be able to build on top of the blockchain. Let me basically give you a couple of different options on what you can do to actually link into real world assets. And what I'll do is I'll just basically open up, I'll see if I can find the page where I've got this as well, right? So let's have a look at what we got here. I think I might have it here. Here we go. Okay. So there's some really cool articles here. Let me share this one here. This, by the way, is on Medium. Digitizing real world assets, right? Moving real world assets to blockchain. This is the next level of NFTs. NFTs generally at the moment, they're all digital, right? So basically, as we know, you can buy artwork, you can buy all sorts of, like videos, music, all these kind of things as NFTs because it's very easy to link something which is digital, right? And to blockchain. However, this is not talking about that. This is talking about real world assets and how you go about doing that, right? And how this is going to totally shift and change. Is obviously talking about Ethereum, which is like one of the main ones, but not the only ones that is used for NFT. Exactly, so this gives you a basic link to all of it. So let me actually give you this as a link. I'll just post it in here so you have it in here as well. There you go. And then let me just basically show you what the steps are and how you do it, right? So this one already talks about basically what are the actual elements and who's already leading the way here. In terms of actually linking, like if you wanted to actually like get every one of your giant clams to be an NFT, right? So if that giant clam basically ends up, giving you a pearl, right? Or ends up giving you basically, like whatever a giant clam gives you, right? That you basically have that ability, just like I was saying in terms of the rubber trees that Andy Steele does with Planetary today, that you can actually, each one of those, turn them into basically something that you can track on the blockchain, right? That the whole element to this is is about like knowing you're going to have something embedded in that real world, in that real world material. I've talked to you already about, property on the blockchain. In that case, you don't actually need to have something embedded in the property, right? You can actually have it, it's such that basically the contract for that property is basically kept with a lawyer or kept with a bank. And then you've got that contract that then gets subdivided up into multiple levels, right? So I'll give you an example of just like how powerful this can be. If I actually show you, one of the guys, I think I mentioned Justin Sun, right? So Justin Sun, he's the guy, let me just go to his, Justin Sun on Twitter. He's the guy who basically bought lunch with Warren Buffett, and then he tried to buy the Beeple painting that went for, if I say Justin Sun Beeple tweet, all right? So what happened with him was here's his post. He says here, he was actually in the bidding, right? Okay, I participated in the Christie auction for every day, the first 5,000 days. So this is one that sold for 69 million. My first effective bid was 60 million plus fee, 69 million. However, was outbid by another buyer in the last 20 seconds. So it was actually Metakoven who actually bought it, and he beat him at the very, very end. It's like, he's trying to refresh, and it was too late. Difference was less than 0.3% of the total price, right? So he's like a bit bitter about this, right? My purpose for this tweet is to be transparent to our community and public. I respect Christie's and want to congratulate Beeple for his historic sale. This makes him one of the top 3 most valuable living artists, right? And he actually shows him here, verified statements. He's actually videoing that he actually bid for it. And then he's actually kind of like, said, like, yeah, I was in there, I was doing this thing, right? So he missed out, right? So he missed out on that. And so what did Christie's do? Christie's basically then got back to him and said, look, if you really want to spend your $60 million, well, there's other ways you can actually spend that, right? So this tweet actually came out today, right? Here, let me just go to his Twitter, right? Like, let me just, like, I want to go to the whole thing. Where is it? Okay. All right. So this is it now, right? So this is Mark Benoff, right? He runs Salesforce. He goes, congratulations. So what's he congratulating on here? He just posted this like yesterday. I'm thrilled to announce I've won the bid on Time, the Computer and Society, April 2nd NFT, right? So he just bought this NFT here, which is super cool. He's got this price thing that went out. Let me see if I can find the one that he said on Christie's. That's congratulations for Lindsay Lohan's getting right into NFTs right now as well. So he was doing that too. This one here, right? Here we go. So April 1st, right? This got posted. So I am thrilled to announce that Just NFT, so his fund, so he's built a fund that basically he's already got other people invested into, successfully purchased the Femme Nu Couche au Collier by Pablo Picasso. So Christie's got to him and said, listen, like, sorry, we don't have anything really valuable that's an NFT, but why don't you buy a real painting, right? So he bought Pablo Picasso, he bought a Picasso painting for $20 million. Plus he bought 3 self-portraits by Andy Warhol for another $2 million, right? So he basically bought these different paintings. Guess what he's going to do next with this? He's going to turn them into NFTs, and then he's going to actually then have other people that can actually enjoy it as well, right? We're going to see this happen for sure, right? Because he actually then is able to distribute out so much further to other people as well. So this is real life paintings now turning into NFTs as well. So like, okay, so that's one thing you can do. What about clams, right? Like what about things that are real world objects? IBM is basically moving towards this at the moment. And they're actually doing it, as you can see here, by actually creating something. So you actually got here, then walking and say, well, we got sensors. They can have a sensor in something that can be tracked by GPS, and you can actually embed that in something, right? And basically here, so tokenization is the whole world is getting tokenized right now, which basically, as I said, is like the same as like a URL that now turns basically into, a hash or a URL of an actual object as opposed to a company, right? And so here, you need to have a way that you can actually connect the real world object so that if someone moves it around, like if I want to NFT my shoe, that someone can't just kind of like dig it out and then basically like take the token and then like it's no longer tracked by that shoe, right? I want to be able to track it wherever it happens to go. And so basically here, this is actually going through how IBM is building their technology through microcomputers that can be embedded and not easily extracted to then be able to track wherever things are. Like, so this is moving to a token-driven economy where this is actually like, today it takes one click to buy an airline ticket or a new sweater, but if you want to buy stocks or get a mortgage, transactions are more time intensive. We're just waiting for document settlements. Many types of transfer are instant. Assets like gold, real estate, fine art, or carbon credits are more difficult to transfer. blah, blah, blah. By representing physical assets as digital tokens, right, it's possible to unlock the value of real world assets and exchange them in real time, right? So this means that you can actually just walk into a house and just boom, buy it like that. And by you basically getting, the blockchain address of that house, you don't need lawyers, you don't need banks, you don't need any of that stuff. It can be just transacted on the spot. And if you don't want to kind of distribute it to 10 different people, you can do that as well, right? So this is actually going through, and it gives examples like carbon credits, examples like basically turning plastic into a currency, right? This is what Plastic Bank is doing right now. So effectively, people can then actually trade it, and actually, every time they actually return the plastic in, they get the money back out again. So people then get incentivized to actually not leave plastic around, right? Like there's all these things that are actually world changing, right? That is happening, and IBM is like one of the ones leading this. I mean, pretty much anyone that's AI driven. So Amazon will be leading this, IBM will be leading this. This is the difference of the Internet of Things versus the Internet of Assets, right? Assets is where you actually now have got an actual value linked to all of it. And this here is from, this is Deloitte's, right? Deloitte has actually put together a white paper, which I'll give you here. The tokenization of assets is disrupting the financial industry. Are you ready? From art to buildings, a way to invest in assets could be about to fundamentally change with the arrival of tokenization. So what we're going to see with Justin Sun, I believe, is one of the very, very first times, and it's happening so quickly that we're actually seeing real world assets now being tokenized as well, right? So this is what's happening right now. So to answer the question, well, how do you actually tokenize your business, which is working with giant clams right now? Well, you really have got basically at the moment 3 different options. Option number 1 is you wait until basically the technology is available, which will happen within this year, to then basically like ensure you've got sensors as well as basically an asset backing each of those clams, and you actually got a token that backs it, right? Like that's one thing you can do. The second thing is you can say, well, why don't I just take my company and already just tokenize my company, right? Which you can also do, right? You don't have to go through a full public listing to do that. And so here is a step-by-step guide to tokenizing real world assets. Yeah, let me just drop this link in so you got it as well. So this here, I'll drop this link too. It's probably a bit oversimplified, but not really. I mean, this is the block box where actually they do this, right? They help you to tokenize, right? So they'll, you give them a call and get a quote, and they'll basically charge you, but they'll get it done, right? So basically here, what are the steps, right? Like we're doing this with Genius U, by the way. So you just know that we're tokenizing Genius U. We're actually creating the first education credits that actually you can then spend, so that it's the end of student loans, right? Like, because basically if you're actually earning your credits, which you can then spend after you leave, why not do it so that by the time you leave your university degree, you've already got enough money to cover your first couple of years out of university, right? Because you actually earned all that money through university. So why tokenize real world assets? It tells you all about it, why you should do it. So first, asset selection. Okay, clams, that's what we're gonna do. Business requirements, okay, well, build a business plan around the clams. We're gonna make X amount of money in this particular way, right? Okay, token economics, right? Like this is where you actually then set yourself up to do an ICO where you can actually be building basically tokens around it, or you just basically do it where you actually just release a number of those tokens as you go. Technical requirements, put your white paper together, get the development team. I mean, these guys are a development company. You can get another one to help you do it as well. Like make sure you got regulations, because if you are a security token, which is effectively what we just said, like, the difference of an IPO and an ICO is very little today. Originally, the reason there are so many ICOs is that the SEC didn't require you in the US or in whichever government you're in, jurisdiction you're in, you weren't needing to actually be, basically regulated at the same level. That all changed after the ICO boom. You now are as regulated as you are as if you're doing an IPO, right? So there is that to it. But basically, like the steps to get there, this is what it is, right? So what's option 3? Option 3 is when you say, I don't want to have all those regulations, right? Well, that's the difference of a security token, which is where it really is a security where people are investing money and then they're actually getting that token, compared to a utility token, right? And a utility token is like air miles. It's like where people are earning them as they go. So if you actually said, okay, well, my customers, right, they're gonna be earning as they go. They're gonna be I'm gonna be giving them tokens within my community. If you think about, for example, in-game currencies, right, where you pay money and you've actually got the currencies on the system, you just translate that back into US dollars again. Once it's paid, once you got it, the only way you can actually use it is with that company, right? You don't have to be under the same regulations as a security token when you're in a utility token. In the same way, you can create your own loyalty scheme tomorrow, and it doesn't mean that the government has to give you actually any permission to do it. You can just go ahead and do it, as long as it's not something that can be turned easily into a currency, right? And so just know that there are different regulations for different areas, but you can just get started straight away and actually set up yours, just like we already have got on our platform. We've got Gems and Genie Coin, and we didn't need regulations for those. But if we want to go out there and actually create it into a currency that people can then convert into US dollars, well, then we are going to actually have the extra regulations on board. And that is part of our plan going forward, to actually be doing that at the right time as well. So let's just come through and just see if there are other questions on here. Let's have a look here. Because I'm about to finish up here, actually. What happens if the gentleman's, this is Penny, what happens if the gentleman's giant clam gets eaten? What happens to his NFT or token? This is so great. I love that. Well, what happens if your money gets eaten, right? It's gone. That's what happens to it. But this is actually a really important point, right? It's like, to what extent can you actually set the rules? And the answer is you can set it at every level possible, where, for example, he could say, okay, like this is good for a big giant clam, right? Or for the pearl in the giant clam. And if for any reason, like that pearl actually isn't delivered to you, then we will actually convert that NFT to another clam where there will be a pearl, right? And if you actually are willing to underwrite that and give people the option to always know they're going to be, they're going to actually be good on that, that's no difference from basically like, putting your money down to buy a Tesla, and the fact that the Tesla that Elon was creating for you didn't work out quite as planned, he'll give you another one, right? You're still going to get your Tesla. So there is always a way to do it, but this is the great thing about the blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You can set the rules however you want it to be. Just think about this for a moment, right? In the future, there's no place left for a middleman. Like why on earth would you have a lawyer when your entire contract can be on that NFT, right? You don't need a lawyer anymore to basically make you sign things, because as long as you've actually done that transfer, you don't need a signature at all, right? Like there it is, it's done. What about accountants, right? The only thing an accountant does really when they're auditing numbers is try and figure out, for all the money that comes in, where's all that money gone, right? And the whole thing is totally over complex, because every single dollar is the same as every other dollar. So then it's like, well, did that dollar go over there? Did it go over there? Where did it go? Imagine we get to that point where basically your entire business is run on cryptocurrencies, which actually have the ability for every dollar or Bitcoin or Ethereum, for every one of your pieces of currency, that currency has got code in it, which tells it where to go. So you could say, for example, okay, my business has got $1 million of cost every single month, right? When the money comes in, the first 10%, the first $100,000 that comes in, that goes to pay my salary straight away, right? So the dollar comes in, it goes, where am I going? I'm going to pay salary. When am I paying the salary? At the end of the month. Boom, it goes, right? Like straight away, it just knows where it's going to go. And at the end of the month, it goes and the salary gets paid. Okay, the next 10% is going to go into marketing. It's going to go here, right? And then like every dollar that comes in knows where it's going the moment it comes in. And then off it goes to that place. You don't need an accountant anymore, because the whole thing just basically will be automatically accounted for, right? And you'll then it will flow out your P&L, it will flow out your trial balance, it will flow out your balance sheet. Like all of the stuff will just come out just naturally, because everywhere's always got a place to go. And you can already say to someone, hey, look, like you're in the queue. As soon as the money comes in, it's coming to you. It's like no one's like saying a check was lost in the post, because that money is just automatically moving from where it is to where it needs to go. And the moment you actually have that ability to do that. So as an example, with NFTs, one of the most interesting thing about the NFTs is the fact that you can code the NFT to do whatever you want. What Square is doing now that Square has bought Jay-Z's company with music is they've said, look, we can actually plug into the NFT that if you sell a piece of music, like if I was a musician and I sold you like a piece of music which was an original, and then you then sell it on to others, I could still get a cut of that, like just automatically paid to me. If the NFT says, right, the musician is always going to get 2% of every transaction. So you could happily sell that from person to person, and it can go like, second, third, fourth, fifth person goes and buys and sells it. And the musician is making money every time it actually changes hands. So you can code whatever you want into it. And that's the most exciting thing. We can totally transform the system to actually be fair and at the same time reward the people that need to be rewarded. Like one of my ambitions with EdTech is to actually make teaching one of the highest paid jobs. Like what YouTube proved is that it could actually make a YouTuber a really in-demand role, because millennials and kids are realizing they can make millions of dollars by just doing YouTube videos. So many people then do it, right? What if you knew you could make millions of dollars by actually teaching? because if you did a really good course and then that could straight away be used by 1 million people and each one of them pay you $1 for that course, right? Then you can be a millionaire straight off. We'll have people going, I'm going to teach, right? That's what I'm going to do. Because the biggest issue that we have right now in the education system is there just simply aren't enough access. Not there aren't enough good teachers, there aren't enough access to the good teachers because most of them are actually stuck with like 40 or 50 kids and they don't have that easy way to get out to a much, much wider audience, right? So there's like, think about your own industry. Think about what it is that you're doing at the moment and what are the biggest challenges, not that just you're having, but that your industry is having, and say, well, what is going to be the solution to that? And who's going to be the one that creates that solution? There's a very good chance whatever you think the solution is, that will be the solution for sure, right? But the real question is who's going to be the one that does it. And if you can convince people that that really is a problem worth solving, and then they believe that you're the one that's going to be best at solving it, then great. And by the way, you may not be the best at solving it. There might be someone else in the industry who already is ahead of you. Go work with them, right? Because then you're at the cutting edge just by actually working with those guys as well. And that's one of the most important things to be thinking about as you actually go forward as well. So with all that being shared, I'm now going to complete. Let me just see. Yeah, I can see you all chatting with each other. I would love for you to post whatever has been, biggest thing just out of this session, and more importantly, the biggest action you're going to take. If you're going to be posting and dropping in, you already plan to actually do the slides and basically submit them. Just drop a line. I'd love to actually see a comment to say, yep, I'm going to be doing it, because I'll then be looking out for your one. You guys are the diehards, right? Here we are on Good Friday, and you're here on this live Q&A, which is awesome. So thank you very much, everyone, for being on here. Really hope that you had a great week with us, and I will catch up with you next Thursday when we do our prize giving and our awards, and you get to see the winning slides as well. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We will catch up with you all later. Bye.